Welcome to the Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership Podcast. Subscribe now so you don't miss a drop of straight talk you can't get anywhere else. We discuss the whiskeys to drink, music to listen to, and what it really takes to be an effective leader. I'm your host, Galen Bingham, the leadership strategist. Tonight's guest, managing editor at Found Health, Shaun Chavis. Hey, what you drinking? I'd love for you to talk about that as well, because, here's an example of something that a lot of times people would run from, and they would try to hide, and they would try to minimize. And it seems like you're taking this struggle that you've had your whole life, and that's something that you're leveraging. I mean, it's not that you're running from it. You're putting it on blast and say, hey, look, this is a big part of who I have been. I'm on this journey. Let me leverage that to communicate with passion and with empathy that others will probably resonate with. Does that take courage? That seems like that takes a lot of courage.
Oh my gosh. I just take it one day at a time. I really am grateful for the opportunity to be where I am and to help shape the conversation about obesity and weight. And I'm really grateful to live in this time that we're living in, because now there are like real solutions and real treatments, and the way that we think about what obesity is changing. It has been something I've struggled with ever since I was a child. I've been on my own personal journey with it. I ended up having bariatric surgery last year, and I take medication, and I've lost 115 pounds so far.
Wow.
Yeah. It's crazy. But I've been dieting ever since I was a kid and been struggling with the social issues and, weight bias. And I mean, there's so much that comes with that. Like there's bias that we, face, in the workplace, and there's bias that we face in the doctor's office and, everywhere we go. And I think that greatly impacts people's mental health, as well as physical health. And so, like, you're right, like it has been a part of my career. It was one of the reasons I really got into cooking as a young person, because I wanted to be able to cook for myself. And number one, I wanted delicious food, but also as I got into my teen years, I was really exploring what is healthy food and, those kinds of things. And then at Health Magazine, I was really able, again, I was the first diet editor, and, to be able to share my voice and my experience. It was painful sometimes, people, have their opinions or have their biases. And I wrote a blog about weight. And so we got a lot of comments that were not positive at all. You can imagine. But, for some people, it also, helped for them to, be able to have somebody they can relate to who was sharing, the kinds of research and insights and things that I had access to. And where I am now, we are now at a point where obesity has now, for the last 12 years, by the American Medical Association, at least, and longer in other medical circles, is recognized as a chronic disease. And I know a lot of us think, oh, you just don't have any willpower, or you're lazy, those narratives. But in fact, it is a chronic, very complicated, progressive disease that requires medical treatment. There are groups of physicians, mostly both endocrinology boards in the United States, that actually want to change the name to adiposity-based chronic disease, to remove that stigma and to acknowledge that it's a disease. So I'm really grateful that I can kind of help shape the conversation. I think when I think about my own community, Black Americans and particularly Black women, there's such a high incidence of obesity among Black women. Some of the causes for obesity, largely it's genetic, but also science now knows that stress can contribute to obesity. Sleep deprivation can contribute to obesity. Environmental pollutants can contribute to obesity. And I think that we as a people, a marginalized group in the United States, get more than our fair share of those things.
Well, wait, hold up. You need to say that again. Are you suggesting that Black life in America is a stressful conversation. That's a stressful experience.
I'm gonna go out on a limb.
Talk a little bit about what it takes to have that conversation, because you're having a number of conversations with the general public and in corporate boardrooms. You're having a number of conversations at the same time, and there's an intersectionality there. You talk about obesity, which that requires a pretty complex and a pretty sophisticated conversation. You talk about being African American, and I'm going to tell you, being Black in America, that's some grown folk stuff. That's some grown folk stuff. That's not for the faint at heart. And then you're having the conversation as a woman, which, guys, we don't want to admit it, but I don't know that I'd want to trade places with women, because you know what's the joke about Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire? Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, but only backwards and in heels. It's like, yeah, that's three very complex, complicated conversations. You're having them a lot of times all at once. Talk a little bit about the dexterity that's required to navigate that conversation in a way where people will still hear you.
Yeah. So again, I think it kind of goes back to a little bit to the whiskey, jazz, and leadership metaphor. You have to know yourself and you have to know your passions. But you also have to be able to share. You have to be able to share the room, and so I think it takes a lot of empathy. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how to word things in a way that people can hear them or see the perspective that, because when you think about weight bias, like a lot of people call it like the last accepted bias, the last culturally accepted bias.
Mm.
So, there isn't a lot of empathy for people who have obesity. And so people aren't used to thinking through that lens or thinking through those eyes or through those experiences. So I try to break things down in a way that it's relatable and that hopefully sets off, light bulbs and enlightenment for people. I think like that's initially how I try to approach things. But I do have my passionate side. Like I'm very passionate about getting these messages out and telling people, this is not your fault. It's a disease and you need to go see a specialist about it, it's not a personal failing. It's not a lack of willpower, and you deserve medical care. And that is like, even for people who have obesity, that is a radical thought. I can't tell you what a radical thought that is for people. So it really just takes like patience and passion.
Hmm. Wow. Talk a little bit more about, because I really love this conversation, but just talk a little bit more about some of the challenges, some of the hurdles that you've had to clear in having that conversation as a woman in spaces where, you know, it's very, I hear a lot about how women feel dismissed in business conversations. And I've seen them play on one or the other extreme. I've seen women who have, a quick nod to one of my accountability partners, Miss Shana Renee Hammond, who brought this to my attention. She says that everyone has feminine and masculine energies. And it's just that women have a tendency to default to feminine energies, and men have a tendency to default to masculine energies. So this has nothing to do with male or female. Feminine energies has to do with this idea of nurturing, allowing, cultivating, developing, that kind of thing, negotiating. Are feminine energies. Masculine energies tend to be more like driving, creating, building, grinding, and those tend to be masculine energies. But men and women, everyone has both. And I have seen some women in business who only want to display their masculine energies. right? They only want to grind and make and create and build, and that's all they want to show, because they don't want to have any opportunity for people to dismiss them. And then I've seen some women who they only want to show their feminine energies. They're only wanting to allow and cultivate and develop and nurture. And the real trick is, how can you use whatever is appropriate for the situation? How can you use these energies on demand, not based on a default, but based on, this is what you're choosing to use right now because the situation calls for it. How complicated is that walk?
It is. It's really complicated. And again, like I think you really have to start with I know I keep coming back to this, but I think you have to start with some conversations with yourself and some self-knowledge, right? Because like to begin to even have an effective conversation where you're going to get results or you're going to influence somebody, you have to know, like, where are you authentically coming from and how can you be authentic in being persuasive. And I feel like if you're not comfortable with the way that you present yourself, you're not going to persuade anybody else, right? Like if you're not convinced about you, how can you convince anybody else? And so like, and it's really interesting balancing those two energies like you talked about. Like I have mentors who are women who totally play to their masculine energy, like you said. Like one of my mentors, she had a military career and then she went into business. And so she totally operates in her masculine energy. I know she has feminine energy. I've seen that side of her. But when she's doing business, she totally operates in her masculine energy. Like you feel the colonel in the room, even though she's not wearing a uniform, and she'll be wearing 3-inch stilettos too. And like, but you cannot like, and but that's how she does it. And I've seen that in my sister. My sister went into the military also, and I know the feminine side. I grew up with her, and I remember her little cute little cornrows. But I've seen her like all of a sudden, here comes the major, and I'm like, whoa, what? I didn't know you had that in you. For me, I it's not easy for me to display masculine energy like that. Like that doesn't feel authentic to me. But at the same time, I'm very driven. And I think one of the things that impressed me that I saw my father do that impresses the way that I approach things is, even though he had a very, he spent 30 years in the military, so he had that sense of command and he was an officer. And I mean, in some places he was like the only Black officer, or, he went to pilot school and he was the only Black person in, his class. Like he was in the military when they were first integrating in Korea during a war, so he has that kind of grit. But then he also, like the way that I experienced the military through his career was, we create peace, we negotiate, we try to find ways for everybody to get along, and keep it. And that's not the way that a lot of people, that's not the first association people make with military when they think military. They think might and power, right? But Dad, at least the way that he portrayed it to us was, we negotiate, we create peace, and so that's a very different kind of energy. And he was really good at that energy. And so for me, the way that I embody that and carry that is, I'm very driven about what I want. Like I get a goal and I'm fixed on it and I'm going to get it. But as I do that, I make friends. I find ways to persuade people. This is a good thing. And I want everybody to leave the room feeling like they got something, and I've got what I want to. And I try to, one of our mottos at the company I work for is build a bigger table. And so I try to build a bigger table. Like I want to make sure people feel good. I want to make sure people are getting what they need while I get what I need. And I want, like, if I get people to buy in, I want them to feel good about it.
I love it. I love it. And if you're listening to this, before you get upset at me, do a quick Google search on feminine and masculine energy, because there's really some good literature on what that's about. And the converse of what I said earlier, I've seen some men who only want to leverage their masculine energies. And to your point, Shaun, there are times when the best thing for you to do is to negotiate a situation in a way where people feel good about it. And that's calling on feminine energies. That's not grinding. I've never seen anyone come to my side because they lost a debate. Right? I've never seen anyone lose a debate and say, "Okay, Galen, you're right. I agree. Let me give you everything that you want because you beat me in a debate." Right? And if they do, they don't feel really good about it. So it's the mix of the two. And I'm curious too about your. I asked you about your visible board of directors, and you've got a good mix of people on your board who they know how to step in and out of both of those energies depending upon the situation. Talk a little bit about some of the folks that you've got on your board.
Think probably the best person on my imaginary board that would embody what we've been talking about is Stacey Abrams,
Yes.
right? And I've been listening to her book, Minority Leader, which is fabulous, again, for what we were talking about, because she talks about how to lead when you're an outsider, how to lead a group when you're an outsider. And so before she, became a gubernatorial candidate, she was, in the Georgia state legislature and, in a room with men who did not look like her, right? And leading and being effective. So I highly recommend her book. But she is someone who really embodies both of all of those energies. Like, she has been a politician. She is an entrepreneur. A lot of people don't know she's also written romance books. Like that, it's like living on both sides of your brain, man.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Exactly.
And she's been successful at all of it, all of it. And when you think about the way that she exercised her feminine energy of building coalitions and bringing people together and empowering people and nurturing, and the way that if you don't live in Georgia, like what happened in the 2020 election with Georgia becoming blue and going behind Biden was because Stacey Abrams led she believed Georgia has a Democratic voters. They're just oppressed, like the blue is here. It's just y'all don't see it. And she exposed it and she nurtured it and she got people out and she built coalitions and built relationships and inspired and empowered people to join that effort of getting the vote out and, expressing what they want. And that's what changed Georgia. And so it was a combination of being driven on a goal and being driven toward changing an outcome and proving, hey, look, there's something here that y'all aren't seeing, and I'm going to show it to you, to the nurturing side of and coalitions building side and relationship building side. Masterful, masterful. And so I think that she's one of the people on the board that totally embodies this conversation.
I mean, just throughout the folks that you think about, there are just a number of people that seem to leverage both sides of that. Not necessarily on your board, but Sarah Vaughan, she's got classic jazz vocalist, probably one of the queens of vocal jazz. And she's got a soft acrobatic side to her. And then she's got some sides that just, you can feel the bottom. You can feel the bottom of what she's trying to do, but she does it on purpose, right? It's not a default. I've got one sound and you're going to get it. Prince, same way. I'm a big Prince fan, but Prince has got this hard rock, this shredding a guitar, tearing up the stage side to him. And then he's got some ballads that he's written for other people that you would not know that Prince, was behind Sinead O'Connor's big hit, or Shaka Khan, or any of these people. And then he's got a total jazz session that he doesn't sing at all. It's all instrumental. And even Leslie Odom Jr., he's someone who multi-talented. I've seen him play do some acting roles where he was hard charging and really believable. as a gangster. I mean, like to the point where I didn't like him very much after that role, right? And then I've seen him play roles where there's more of a tender side, and that tender side definitely comes out in his jazz music as a vocalist. Talk a little bit more about what seems to be important for you to appreciate this ability to weave in and out of masculine and feminine energies. And I'm just going to say, in all my time knowing you, I've never known you to be mean and hard and rough and gruff, but I have seen you be very, very determined and very, very insistent, and you're doing it in a nice way. So people might not even recognize she's not going to let this go. Talk about why that seems to be important to who Shaun Chavis is.
Yeah. I don't that's just my passion. Like I think I'm just driven by like I get a vision or I get fixated on a goal. I don't know if fixated is the right word, but I just get stuck on a goal. Maybe that's a better word. Fixated, maybe. But like I just have a vision that I have to bring to life. I have to do it. Like I have to see it happen. My mother called me hard-headed. I think I have this trait. So I think I have this trait early on, but I just gotta make it happen. And I think that I have such exuberance or excitement about getting to the finish line that I don't have time for negative energy. I've got time for all the energy that's going to help me make this thing in my head become a reality. And I did have this trait early on. Like you don't know this, but I used to sew. I used to sew my own clothes when I was younger. And I would be so determined to finish it, because I'd have a vision in mind of what I wanted to make. There were many nights where I would fall asleep on the floor on top of fabric and patterns because I just had to get to the finish line. And so that's what really drives me. But yeah, I also like, I love bringing people along for the ride. Like to me, I'm so excited about what I'm focused on or where I'm headed. And I want people to enjoy that ride with me. And so I try to find people who are aligned with what I'm doing and want to share the journey. We have like we share a common goal or we can share some excitement around that journey and get there.
Wow. Wow. So you guys are hearing so many leadership principles that I think undergird the success that Shaun has been able to have in so many different avenues. I'd love for you to talk specifically to our leaders. Talk specifically to what are some principles that we've talked about already, but how does it apply to their ability to get people to want to follow? Because there's one thing to make people follow. I used to say that with seniority comes a certain degree of protection against insubordination, right? So because you got a title, yeah, you're going to get some people that's going to do some things just because, job security is pretty important. But it's another thing to get people to want to follow. How have some of the things that you've talked about played into your ability to persuade people to want to follow?
Sure. So you have to have a clear vision. You have to be passionate about it, and it has to be genuine. It has to be authentic. I don't think you can build a coalition or build a support team unless you have a clear vision. You have to have a great way to share that vision. You have to be very clear. So when I was a cookbook editor at Time Inc., one of the ways that not only did I have a vision that, I had a team of people working on a particular cookbook, but we had clients, and sometimes they were in-house clients. Like, I was producing a book for Cooking Light, and they're a separate team, and they're not sure, the book editors can translate the magazine into a book very well. So part of that was building the relationship and getting their buy-in. So it involved getting to know them and getting to understand them and getting to understand their values. So I think that that's important. I think then, reflecting that you understand those values, and you embrace them too. Sharing a vision. So going back to my career as a cookbook editor, I kept a giant board that was like 6 feet high, leaning outside of my door, my office door. And I would pin pictures of recipes that we were working on or inspirational art or things like that. You have to share the vision in a way that excites people. You have to understand how people work, the people that are going to be on your team. My approach to recruiting a team is find really good professionals, tell them what you need, give them what they need, and get out of their way. And to really understand, to make that happen, you have to understand how they work. You have to understand, that the photographer wants to start early in the morning because they only shoot natural light and they want to get all the daylight they can. You have to understand that they want to see what the recipes actually look like so they can pull dishes and napkins that, complement the food, to use an example. You have to really understand the people that you're working with and what they're capable of. And then that way you can kind of be the orchestrator to bring it all together and make the vision happen. So those, I think, are things that leaders can maybe take inspiration from.
Man, gosh, I just love having brilliant people in my contact list, and we've heard stories about the impact that your father had on how you see the world and how you try to move throughout the world. We've heard stories about all the success that you've had with inspiring books and contributing to books who have gained acclaim on the New York Times bestseller. And, one of the things that I want to say that I do well is when I get an opportunity, I reach out to brilliant folks and get them to help me. And so I reached out to you when I was contributing my second book, and you shared some advice that Miss Rose Chavis shared with you. And I was smart enough to copy that word for word and include that in my book. Would you share that advice that you shared with me? Because I think our leaders can benefit from that as well.
My mom said, stop doing the things you have always done that are keeping you from success. And that's like so simple. Like it seems like it would be a no-brainer, but sometimes you have to go, like, what am I doing that's keeping me from getting to my goal? And why am I still doing it?
Man. And to your point, that is so simple. That's one of those, duh, of course. Of course, I should stop doing the things that just aren't working. Man, boy, time is going by so fast. But I would love for you to just share a little bit about, and you've already done this, share a little bit about the importance and the impact that your parents have had on you. Because, you and I can identify with you in that the stereotype very often in Black families is that there's only one parent there. There's either a strong Black who is being mom and dad, and unfortunately that is a reality for a lot of families, or there is this pioneering Black man that's doing it all on his own and he's being the super father. Very seldom do you have the experience that you and I share where both of our parents were in the house. Both of our parents were speaking into us, and we walk away with this richness that unfortunately a lot of people in our community don't have the luxury of appreciating. What's been the benefit of that, especially as you're now a grown woman of your own, and you could probably appreciate it more? What's been the benefit of coming up in a house with such a rich family foundation?
And I didn't really, you're right, like I didn't appreciate it until I was older. But so my father, as you all have heard, was a military officer who became an entrepreneur. My mother was for a while a teacher before she got married, was a stay-at-home mom slash officer's wife, which is a whole different ball of wax, especially, in the 70s and going forward, integrating spaces that hadn't been before. And then she went back to teaching and taught for I think another 20, 25 years before she retired. And then my family, my aunts and uncles and my mother's parents all valued education very much. Like all of my aunts and uncles had PhDs, all of them. And my Both of my mother's parents had master's degrees. Both of my parents had master's degrees. So we were a very educated family. My mother, because she was an officer's wife, navigating those spaces were often, like I've talked about how my father was often the only Black officer on a base where we were. My mother was often the only Black, officer's wife, and like to me, that's like a whole nother book. Like nobody tells that story of
Yeah.
navigating those spaces. But when I was a young girl, a lot of my early role models were military wives because they make stuff happen that you don't see. But they are kind of behind the scenes, really helping to negotiate and build relationships that are valuable. So I think having that upbringing, really knowing myself and being bold and being brave to step into spaces where, you haven't been before, is really what I take away from my upbringing and my parents and the life that I had because of them.
Oh my gosh. This I can't believe how fast and how quickly the time has gone. I've got to bring you into the VIP rooms because my VIPs, they enjoy every guest that I bring in. And I don't know that I've had a guest come into the VIP with such a diverse but rich experience as you. Certainly, I haven't brought anyone who has known me for as long as you and I have known each other. We did bring in Bo Stevens. So, Bo Stevens, a fellow classmate that we brought in. I think that was season 3, maybe. But oh my gosh, if you've got a few minutes, I'd love for you to come into the VIP room. But on this side, any last thing you want to share with our audience before we toast out?
I can't think of anything, Galen. I really love this conversation. I hope people walk away with a sense of being able to figure out what their passions are and how they can authentically balance those feminine and masculine energies to inspire others.
Ah, boy, that is a great desire for anyone, especially anyone trying to be or attempting to be a leader in any space. And we're going to continue that conversation in the VIP room because we want to give some advice specifically to those who are leading massive organizations. And then you've got some people who are like, hey, look, I'm not trying to lead a whole bunch of people. It's just me and my small team, or just me, and we're just trying to do this thing a little better. And you've played at both ends. So I can't wait to have you share with the VIPs how you've navigated that and any recommendations. So with that, raise your tea, raise that mason jar. I'm gonna raise my fancy whiskey glass here with my birthday bourbon and toast out until we can get to the other side. But Shaun, thank you so much for what you're doing in the space that you're in, and the fortitude, passion, and elegance with which you do it. Because I haven't seen very many people navigate and dance on that line as nicely as you have, where you're still a nice person. People like you. I've never seen you without a smile. But at the same time, we're going to get some stuff done. That's very, very clear. And I just really appreciate the way that you've been navigating those spaces, even since the days that we were locker neighbors back at Putnam City North in Oklahoma City. So cheers.
Cheers. Thank you for having me on your show. It's a pleasure.
Hey, it's not too late. Hit that subscribe button so you're sure to catch the next episode. If you're really enjoying the vibe, leave us a review or become a VIP for guest and show exclusives. Cheers.